that in Economy Hall, it's not like people come into the festival to watch, concerts on the stage. It's like people are bonding, and you develop long-term friendships with people. I mean, I've heard from, I can't even tell you how many people that are, sending regrets because they're missing the festival this year from all over the country, all over the world, really. And you become like a family. You develop friends. Your relationship extends beyond the festival. They write to you, you talk, and you get to know people's families and the history and all of that. That's not like going to a concert. That's like being a part of something really magic and special.
Hi, I'm Sally Young. Welcome to my podcast, Everything New Orleans. Growing up in New Orleans was like no other experience on the planet. I always knew that there was no other place like it. As a teenager, I started working with the music that was the soundtrack of my youth. Professor Longhair, Earl King, Al Carnival Tom Johnson. They became real people to me, not just voices I heard on the records. I worked with a lot of Mardi Gras Indians after seeing them on my way to my Nan's apartment on the corner of St. Charles and Jackson on Mardi Gras Day. Then I got to ride in the Zulu parade a couple of times, passing that same corner where I stood on the neutral ground since I was a little kid every Mardi Gras morning. My life revolved around the music, the food, and community spirit of New Orleans. That became my service, and ultimately, my joy. That's My New Orleans. Everything New Orleans is a podcast developed to share my experience living, working, and being in New Orleans. From my introduction to music through the early years of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival to my development as a show host for radio station WWOZ here in New Orleans. Welcome to my podcast, Everything New Orleans. I'm your host, Sally Young. This year would have marked the 51st year of the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. Unfortunately, this year's festival was canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our memories of the past 50 festivals are being shared through virtual experiences. For this episode of Everything New Orleans, I've invited a few of my close friends to join me and share their stories about my favorite Jazz Fest tent, Economy Hall. Say hello to Dodie Simmons, Roberta Grace, Dr. Michael White and Mark Shearer. Doratha Smith Simmons, a.k.a. Dodie, is one of the original festival organizers.
Hello, everybody. My name is Doratha Dodie Smith Simmons, and I became involved with the Jazz Festival in 1969. I don't think it had a name then. I worked at Preservation Hall, and I got involved in Preservation Hall through the Civil Rights Movement. I worked for the Congress of Racial Equality Corps in the Southern Regional Office on Dryde Street. Used to go by Preservation Hall, staying in the window, then go to Cafe de Monde and so forth. And one night, my roommate and I decided to go in. Mike Stark was working there, and Mike Stark was one of the original founders also, as I call it, of the Jazz Festival. And Alan Jaffe knew George Wein because the Preservation Hall band had played at Newport. When George was coming down, he had called Alan Jaffe. And Jaffe had a group of people: Larry Bornstein, Sonny Rokerson, Bill Russell, Buster Holmes, Bruce Bryce, Dick Allen, and a few other people. Jaffe and I would sit in the back in the patio or go across the street to Johnny White's bar. And he wanted to know, because I went to listen to all kind of music. And when I started working there full time, I told him I would work every night except Thursday night. And he said, "Why not Thursday night?" I said, "That's Joy Tavern's night. It was college night." So he made me an offer. If I got back before 12:30, he would pay me for the whole night, which he did. And so because he knew I went to hear other music, Jaffe would grill me about who was playing, where they were playing, and, because I knew a lot of the musicians. And even when I lived over the hall, on Friday night or Saturday morning, I would go to Hollis on Villery and Basin Street, where the musicians would have a jam session from 3 to 7 in the morning. And you would hear some of the greatest music, combination of musicians playing together. Stumble home, stop by Buster Home, because I lived over Preservation Hall. So I would stop by Buster Home about 7:30, have breakfast, go home and go to bed. And so I would tell him where musicians was playing and who was playing where and all of this. So when George came to town, we got together and, talked about it. Now, Quint was not involved then, but he was working at the archive, he and Allison Minor. And Dick Allen recommended Allison and Quint to George Wein. So that's how I got started with it.
I want to introduce Roberta Grace, who was longtime stage manager at Economy Hall. Roberta, tell us about how did you get involved with Jazz Fest and especially Economy Hall?
I'm thinking about that time before I started working there. I was working for Alan Toussaint as his chief engineer. And then, of course, we played the festival one night, either on the Natchez, or not the Natchez,
the President,
Admiral, or whatever that was.
No, the President.
The President, you're right. I couldn't think. There was too many of them. And we would do that. We did that for years. We had to wag all of our own, back then you had to wag all your own gear on. And of course, Alan would practice for a week and go over with those musicians so it'd all be right. And then we'd go there for a sound check. And if you weren't off getting your gear in before that boat pulled out, you were stuck on that boat till it came back in. And then you would have the sound check then. So I did it the entire time I worked for Alan. And then somebody asked me, they said, you want to be towards the end there, you want to be a stage manager? No, you want to work the Jazz Fest? And I said, yeah, that'd be interesting. I said, what have you got position-wise? Oh, you can be a stagehand. I said, I don't think so. I said, I've long paid my dues. I'm not going to be no stagehand. And then after I left Sea Saint, I did the World's Fair. I had the circus tent at the World's Fair, and that overlapped the Jazz Fest. And then when it was time for Jazz Fest to come along again, they called me up again. They said, Roberta, we have a good position if you'd like to have it. I said, what do you have? They says, you can be the stage manager at Economy Hall, traditional jazz. I said, that's perfect for me because I used to do, when I worked for Cosmo, we did a lot of the traditional jazz back then with remotes, with Deep South Records, and did Preservation Hall and all the older jazz musicians. Sweet Emma, all of the old ones. I always think of Sweet Emma for some reason. But anyway, I said, fine. It seems like the guy, whoever had it before me, got in a fight with, I think, Chris Owens' guitar player or something. They said, that's it, you're going. Well, it worked out real well because I had the patience to deal with the older people because, and then on top of it, I had a great crew. Couldn't beat the crew. So we had a good tent. We really did.
We've got Mark Shearer, who's the current stage manager of the Economy Hall tent. And he started out as a volunteer with the festival, right, Mark?
Yeah, it was kind of an accident. I showed up the second weekend, probably in 1994. I had a friend working with Roberta at Economy Hall, and somebody had just quit or couldn't come or something. They asked me if I wanted to volunteer for free tickets. I said, sure, why not? It's Jazz Fest. And here I am 27, 28 years later.
So, Mark, what was your background before you came to the festival?
Yeah, I've been doing live sound since probably 79. And I've just been involved in all kind of music. When I started working at Jazz Fest, I started working at Murray State. I was running their PA shop and doing sound for people. I did sound for the Dukes of Dixieland when they played at Murray State. And that was before I was working at Economy Hall. And then I met those guys when I got there, and I thought, oh, this is going to be good.
We got Dr. Michael White here with us, who is not only working with the festival, but he's also a musician that's been performing there a lot of years, right, Dr. White?
Yes, hello. How's it going there?
Thanks for the music.
Well, we're not going to be out at Jazz Fest, but that doesn't mean we're not playing, I'll tell you. Jazz Fest has been a very important part of my life. Believe it or not, I've been playing at the festival since 1976 and been playing every year since. I started out playing at Jazz Fest with the Fairview Brass Band. And the next year, in 77, I played with Doc Paulin's brass band. And I had become a regular member of that group. Alton Carson, Big Al, that recently passed, played tuba. And he was with Doc Paulin. We were both students at Xavier University. And I was trying to get into jazz, and he was telling me he was playing with this brass band. I said, if you all ever need a clarinet player, I'd like to try it out. So he told Doc about me, and a few weeks later, I met Doc at Jazz Fest. And that was, the beginning for me. And then a few weeks later, Doc called me, and I became a regular member of his band. And then after about a year, I joined the Fairview Brass Band. I was an old kid in those days. And I had been listening to traditional music, and I really loved it. And the more I got into it, the more I loved it. And so I had been listening to a lot of the older music and the older musicians. And I came to the attention of Dodie, actually, Dodie Simmons and her husband, John. John was playing with us in the Young Tuxedo Brass Band. I had moved into the Union, and I started playing in the Young Tuxedo Brass Band and other groups. And, they heard that I was kind of trying to really get into traditional music. And I had been working on a lot of things. And in 1980, I believe it was, I was very shocked and surprised, but Dodie called me and set me up with my first Jazz Fest job of my own. And it was a trio. And we played on one of the stages. It was clarinet, piano, and drums. And
Michael, can I stop you and tell you why I called and asked you to do that?
Sure.
I booked all of the music in traditional jazz, and I had $300 left over. So I called Michael and asked him if he could put a trio together for the $300, and he agreed to do it. And the rest is history.
Okay, let's go back to the beginning of Economy Hall. How did the Economy Hall tent get named? Dodie, you want to take that?
Well, Economy Hall was the name of an old-time dance hall. There were many halls in New Orleans that had bands playing in them. There was the John Zami, there was the Artesian Hall, and Economy Hall, I think, was it on Ursuline Street?
I believe so.
Yeah, Ursuline.
Yeah,
first started.
And so the reason I wanted to call it Cheapskate Hall instead of Economy Hall, because the Royal Sonesta had a music venue called Economy Hall. The first time I met George Wing, he was playing there. So I didn't want to have a name that had been used, but I really thought Cheapskate Hall would have been great that year because we had no money, no big money coming in.
Michael White, can you talk about the music of that time from the original Economy Hall?
The original Economy Hall was, as Dodie said, one of several buildings by Black benevolent associations. And the original Economy Hall opened, I believe, in 1863. And they had about 1,000 members originally. And, it was free men of color demanding rights, and they would give events. A lot of these benevolent organizations provided, as some of them are called social aid and pleasure clubs. They provided social aid and pleasure. And the pleasure side included dances. They would sponsor all kinds of events, dances, picnics, boat rides. But in those halls, they would have dances. So they actually started playing music, dance music of the 1860s, late 60s and 70s before there was jazz. But eventually they played whatever was the popular dance music of the day. So by the 1890s or so, I mean, they were playing ragtime music, and they had society bands that read music. And eventually when jazz came along, it became, the popular music of the day by the late 1890s, early 1900s. They started having jazz bands that played there. So Economy Hall was important in the history of jazz because a lot of early jazz musicians played there, as they did in a lot of other dance halls.
And when we come back, we'll share more great stories about Economy Hall on Everything New Orleans.
It just looks like so many people are there enjoying themselves, not pushing, not shoving, but there to enjoy the music.
Everything New Orleans is a listener-supported podcast. To subscribe and make a donation, visit us at www.everythingneworleans.buzzsprout.com. For additional ways to support the podcast, please email everythingneworleans@gmail.com. And be sure to like us on Facebook. What was Economy Hall? What did it physically look like? Was it smaller? Was it in a different place? Tell me about the whole setup of Economy Hall in the early days.
In the beginning, there was only one tent, and that was the gospel tent, and it wasn't very big. And we didn't get a tent until we had stage numbers, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. 2 years at Beauregard Square or Congo Square, whatever you want to call it. Then the third year it was done we moved to the fairground. And we only had stages. And it wasn't until I think 1975 that we got there was another tent. It was called a jazz tent. And traditional jazz and contemporary jazz was played in that tent. In 1982, when we began to work on the 83 festival, Quint Davis came to my office and said, Dodie, I'm going to give you your own tent. And that's how Economy Hall came about. Not only did we have a tent, we had a dance because Economy Hall was a dance hall for some of the events. So I had a dance floor put in. And the original floor was put in front of the band, but the audience complained because they couldn't see the band. So we moved it to the location it is now on the side of the band. And I call that the Funky Butt dance floor after the Funky Butt Hall.
I didn't know it had an official name.
Yeah, that was a great thing that Dodie did because New Orleans jazz, traditional jazz is dance music. And
it's functional music.
Yeah, and the musicians, we're inspired by people dancing. I mean, I've written songs because of people dancing at jazz fest, And so that was one of the great things, and people really love that, and they have a lot of fun. I mean, we, do things in the Economy Hall that they don't do in the other tents.
Yeah, is crowd surfing a problem at Economy Hall?
Only by accident. No mosh pit. So we had to get rid of the mosh pit.
Yeah, I think, Roberta, it's time for you to tell us about your regulars.
Well, I had the same people come year after year, and they set the same spot year after year.
Yes.
And if somebody new came in, and somebody was sitting there next to where they sat down, they said, "Oh no, you can't sit there. So-and-so is going to be sitting there," even though they hadn't arrived yet. And people understood. People understood if they got up and went someplace else, their chair would still be there when they come back. People would sit there all day long. But, a lot
that
of
wouldn't happen at any other stage.
No, it wouldn't. It certainly wouldn't. Mm-mm. There's one couple that comes in Mystery Street, and they count their anniversary as the last Sunday of Jazz Fest. So that's the date they celebrate their anniversary on. And when I was there, he would grab me when I would come in, or he was a volunteer. This is Larry and Diane and Larry Kamen. And he would grab me because he was a volunteer. He said, "Would you take these and put these on the stage?" And it'd be a dozen long stem run roses. He says, "This is for Diane." And he also had a bouquet for me. He said, "This is for you." I said, "I don't need no roses." He says, "No." He says, "We want you to have it." So I would take and put the roses up on one side of the stage and on the other. I mean, it's just little things like that. They celebrated their anniversary with us and then bring you flowers, you know? How can
And they're
you?
still doing it.
They still bring their flowers? I think it's great. I ran into them the other day in the store.
Yeah, Larry brings me a pint of fig preserves every year.
Oh, he's a good cook. He's a good cook.
Oh, that's wonderful.
I'll tell you what I'm going to miss. And Mark, you're going to know this. You know, you end up being friends. And there's a musician that, Sally, you know, Mark, you know. And I'm not going to say much more than that, but he had a special son. And he would bring him every year. And when he'd see you, I mean, he might have been special, but he would remember you from year to year. They'd say to me, "Erla, bring me a Coke." And I said, "Yeah, baby, I'm going to bring you a Coke." And he'd remember it year after year, you know, and just special people like that we've lost that you really feel a void for.
Yeah, you know, we've got some time to tell some stories, and I'd like to open that one up. I would like to start with Mark, because you told me the story a couple of years ago about Freddie Lonzo, trombone player Freddie Lonzo.
Right. When we got a new sound company, Sound Services out of Little Rock, Arkansas, and the first year they played there, the front of the house board was directly in front of the stage, and everything was going good. Yeah, and everything was going good until Freddie Lonzo showed up, and the front of the house guy, all he could hear was Freddie. No matter what he turned, all he could hear was Freddie. So the next year they show up, and I get in the tent, and the soundboard's as far stage right as it can get in the corner. I asked him why he did it. He said, "So I can hear."
Now, when we told Freddie that story, he was as proud as could be. I have to say that. He loved it.
That's right. I have to say one thing about the sound companies that we had. I think in the 20 years I was there, I only heard a feedback for about 3 seconds, one time, and that's all. One thing about the stage guys, and Mark was one of them, Emery Thompson, huge man, played the trumpet. I mean, he couldn't walk. We didn't have a ramp. He was in a wheelchair. And them boys picked that wheelchair up and carried him to the top of the stage. That was long before we had a ramp.
I want to bring Mark into the conversation again. Mark, what do you see with the audience from the days when you started at Economy Hall and now? What differences do you see with the audience?
Well, when bands like the original Liberty Jazz Band start playing, they get up and they start opening their umbrellas and strutting around the walkways, kind of an indoor parade. Right. They've grown younger. The old people, they're coming for the dancing in the second line, and they're having a blast. The dance floor stays full a lot. The second line, and sometimes you can't even get through the tent. There's so many people second line. You look out in the audience, and everybody out there is happy. And that's something you don't see very much anymore. A whole crowd of people, everybody's happy, everybody's getting along. And it's a big family. There's probably at least 150 people that are there every year, every day in that tent. Every year. That's probably an underestimate.
It just looks like so many people are there enjoying themselves, not pushing, not shoving, but there to enjoy the music. That's what they came for. And they like the camaraderie of the people around them and the way everybody talks. There's no screaming or yelling, no drunks bobbling around, no one spilling food on them. And I think that's a lot of it. and they're taken care of.
I want to ask Dodie. Dodie, you have a favorite story from Economy Hall?
Remember the day Linda Hopkins it was so hot in the tent, she took off her top?
No, I might not have seen that.
Oh, I remember that. I was there. I remember that very well. She said it was hot, and I was standing.
It was hot, and Joyce Ween was there. Go get a T-shirt. Go get a T-shirt. I said, let her alone. She hot.
I was there. I was a musician driver in that year, and I was driving the next act. We were backstage when that happened, so I was there too. She pulled off her blouse, and she had a brassiere that went down to her waist, the full figure brassieres, and it was so tight it was popping at the seams on the side, and she didn't care.
But she did a great show.
Oh, did she? And she came back the next year, as I recall, and got up on the stage and said, Quint said I have to leave my blouse on this year. This is a family festival. Yeah, so Michael, you've got a little different perspective from being on the stage because you're actually playing in your band. So what's that like compared to all your other concerts all around the world? You come to Economy Hall. What does that look like?
For all the musicians, it's like a reunion of old friends, sometimes old classmates you haven't seen in forever, people you've seen on tour, family members that you haven't seen in a while. All kinds of people come, and it's really great. It's a great experience, bonding.
Yeah, so when you come down off the stage and you get to mix and mingle with the crowd that comes up to see you at the barricades. Yeah, because that's every set when it ends, there's just this great gathering of people to see y'all, to talk to all the musicians, all the bands. Everybody has personal relationships. They want to meet you guys. I mean, it's just a great vibe. What's special about Economy Hall?
Everything. The music, the people. The stage managers, the people working backstage, everything. It's just a great coming together.
So, I was a music fan, and I'd been to Jazz Fest, 7 or 8 times before I started working there. And after you sit backstage and you listen to music, you get to hear the music the musicians getting ready to play, and then you get to hear them play. And, the band gets up on the stage and starts playing. And if Michael White's sitting backstage, he'll pull out his clarinet and start playing along with them behind the stage. So what I try to do is I try to position myself where he's in the mix good. So you get to hear Michael White play with half the bands that are up there on the stage.
I thought it was quiet. I didn't know anybody could hear.
It's probably I'm probably the only one that hears it. I sit there and listen, so.
Well, I have to say to Roberta and Mark, they are the people who make Economy Hall. Because I have been to some tent stages where the stage managers are just so rude. And I would say if Roberta was here, this wouldn't be happening. Because they didn't know how to take care of their musicians and their audience. Roberta did a wonderful job. I appreciate everything that she did while she was with the festival. And all the people who came to Economy Hall, they also appreciate Roberta and what she did. And I will always be grateful to you, Roberta. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dodie.
But before I go, I would like to say, when Cosmo Matasic was there as the sound engineer, I was so thrilled to have him there.
Where at Economy?
Yes.
That must have been when it started.
No, I was just saying that, he did the sound, I think, a couple of years in Economy Hall. And, he's just such a hero of mine that, I was just really thrilled to have him in Economy Hall.
Cosmo Matassa was mixing sound in Economy Hall. One of the founders of Rhythm and Blues. Yeah, that was great. I didn't know that myself. Okay, well, Dodie, tell us about you coming every year. Are you still as excited now as in the very beginning?
I think over the years, I've met so many people And really, what I come out for is to see people that I've met over the years. We've lost a lot of friends, but every year I'm meeting somebody different. So to me, it's a chance to, like everybody say, to get together with family and friends, to hear the music, to dance, and just enjoy. There's always next year. And I got all my CDs and records because I have to play some records because I don't have a CD of that group. But I have my own Dodie Real New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival in my apartment. I'm playing music. I'm running from stage to stage. I'm dancing all over the place. What about you? You're there every year.
Oh, I still get just as excited. I've been there almost the whole 50 years, but oh yeah, it's in fact this year we were all getting ready to do this thing again, right? And then everything happened with COVID, and here we are. At least we're together, but I still can't believe that we're not out at Jazz Fest this week. I mean, it's a big hole. It's a big hole in my heart. It's a big hole in my schedule, my calendar.
Yeah, I agree with Sally.
Yeah, it almost feels like being at the festival. You know, it's been great working with everybody over the years. I play a lot of stages all over the world, and I haven't seen the professionalism and camaraderie that I've seen at Economy Hall. It's always great.
Man, you need a roadie?
Actually, I might.
I'm good at kicking ass and calling names.
Well, I know. I know.
And she's not prejudiced about it either. She'll do it to anybody.
That's right.
I have a special favor to ask of Dr. Michael White.
Blow us out.
Uh-oh. Do you still have your clarinet handy?
I can't get rid of it. It's stuck to me.
like Pete Maravich in a basketball. Huh? It just stays with you. Can you play us a tune to wrap this up for today?
Anything in particular?
No, it's up to you.
Hey!
Thanks for listening to Everything New Orleans. I'm Sally Young, and this podcast was created to share the stories that originate from my experience working as a media professional in radio and conducting interviews at music festivals and events locally and around the world. Everything New Orleans, the podcast, is an extension of my joy and my service as a native New Orleanian.